Okay, so good morning and welcome to this first panel of the conference, which is entitled Uncharted and Nomadic Wests. We have three speakers with us here today. The first one out will be Elzbieta Horodyska, who is going to talk about regeneration through violence. And the title is rather longish, but I'm sure that she'll be giving a much better explanation as soon as she gets the opportunity to develop her ideas. Elzbieta is a PhD candidate at the Institute of English Studies of the University of Warsaw. Her thesis focuses on the analysis of a selection of Jim Harrison's novels and short stories about the West from the perspective of critical regionalism. So, Elzbieta, a pleasure to have you here, and the floor is yours whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to attend this conference and to give this presentation. It's wonderful to be in Vitoria. It's my first time. It's beautiful. So the title of my presentation, of my paper, is Regeneration Through Violence, Echoes of the Myth of the West in Jim Harrison's road novel, A Good Day to Die. The aim of this paper is to analyze the echoes of the myth of the West in Jim Harrison's road novel, A Good Day to Die, which was published in 1973. The paper offers a discussion of the myth's impact on the actions of the novel's male characters, especially in relation to the female hero. I argue that the road and the West, as spaces stereotypically associated with hope, opportunity, and freedom, do not extend such promise to the heroine of the novel, who finds herself in an environment where masculinity contends for exclusive dominion. The men's initial resolve to save Western landscape tangentially finds expression in their violent, destructive behavior, which is perceived as freedom, and in their mistreatment of the heroine, who is seen as an obstacle to male independence. In the end, the men's reliance on the myth's promise to cure a herding masculinity has tragic consequences for all three, as one of the protagonists dies in the wake of the trio's mission to blow up a dam. In effect, the novel critiques the myth of the West for dangerously obscuring and distorting actuality. The book is also an example of an overlap between two genres of fiction, the road novel and the novel of the West, featuring three typical themes for both genres: escape, freedom, and discovery. So firstly, I would like to offer a few observations about the connections between the novel of the West and the road novel. The most conspicuous and the simplest similarity between the two is that the road, as the setting for the story, most often leads west. What is more, the road often functions as an extension or a reiteration of the way west, the movement of the frontier, breaking the country westwards. Indeed, many critics, as Alexandra Ganser points out, quote, regard the significance of automobility in the United States as an extension of the frontier experience, unquote. Additionally, the road and automobility is associated with the same ideas that the westward movement promoted in the process of defining the American national character, such as opportunity, exploration and settlement of the New World, hope, adventure, escape from some unacceptable situation, new beginnings, individualism, self-reliance, and self-transformation. The road leads west in such literary classics of the genre as Sinclair Lewis's Free Air, published in 1919, John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath, published in 1939, or Jack Kerouac's On the Road, published in 1957. A Good Day to Die is no exception. The parallels between the two literary genres may in part be due to the fact that both stem from the same root of expedition and exploration journals. Also, perhaps in consequence of their common origins, some three recurrent themes, escape, freedom, and discovery, appear in both the road novel and the novel of the West. For instance, we can clearly see them unfold in a classic regarded as representative of both genres, The Grapes of Wrath. The Jodes escape a no longer acceptable situation, hit the road west, an expression of their freedom to pursue the American dream, while some of them, Tom and Rose of Sharon, undergo radical self-discovery and self-transformation along the way. But what is especially significant for the following analysis of A Good Day to Die is that the spaces of the West and the road have both been associated with masculinity and freedom. So the characters of A Good Day to Die, Tim, Sylvia, and the unnamed narrator, all in their 20s, set out west from Florida via Georgia to Arizona and onwards north to Idaho and Montana with an absurd, quite absurd, mission to blow up a dam. For the male heroes of the novel, the trip serves as an opportunity to escape what is for them an unacceptable situation, a masculinity crisis attendant to either existing or pending commitments of marriage, family life, and the social roles of breadwinners that men are conventionally expected to play. The narrator is separated from his wife, at least partly because he has felt inferior in the marriage. Quote, "And as I became less sure of myself," he says, "she gathered strength, became more shrewd and protective, and I began to find the clarity of her intelligence offensive," unquote. Currently on a yearly fishing escapade in Florida, he observes his fishing capabilities to have dropped. Considering the fact that fishing, next to hunting, has been traditionally regarded as an activity through which men can prove themselves, the deterioration of his skills must seem alarming. In Key West, the nameless narrator meets Tim, whose tough masculinity fascinates him. Tim is a Vietnam War veteran out of hospital, perpetually on amphetamines, with a scarred face and a smirking eagle tattoo on his shoulder, restless, ready to pick up a fight, and also dodging marriage to a high school sweetheart from before the war. Sylvia is a modest small-town girl from Valdosta, Georgia, in love with Tim. She joins the trip on the hope of regaining Tim's affection, but ends up being mistreated and manipulated by both men. Because she is beautiful, she becomes a kind of a decorative item of desire and a sort of a mascot of domesticity, brought to the masculine space of the road as if only to remind the two men of the domestic constraints and responsibilities they are running away from. To use Krista Comer's words, quote, "The West as a geocultural imaginary remains deeply associated with masculinism," unquote. Jane Tompkins, in West of Everything, elaborates on the qualities of the mythic West as a cure for a variety of contemporary ills experienced by men. The West, she argues, quote, "functions as a symbol of freedom and of the opportunity for conquest. It seems to offer escape from the conditions of life in modern industrial society, from a mechanized existence, economic dead ends, social entanglements, unhappy personal relations, political injustice. The desire to change places also signals a powerful need for self-transformation," unquote. So by going west, the narrator and Tim subconsciously draw on the myth of the West and hope for self-transformation and self-regeneration. They wish to escape to a culturally sanctioned mythic male space of plenty, where the rivers run freely and abound in fish, where the pioneer spirit could be relived, where the narrator's fishing capabilities could perhaps improve, and his relations with women could be readjusted from the vantage point of male superiority. By communing with the open spaces of Western American landscape that typically represent power, independence, integrity, freedom, and self-reliance, the two men hope to regain vitality and balance and free themselves from the purportedly crippling obligations to women, civilization, and the capitalistic establishment. For the men, the West functions as what Wallace Stegner has termed the geography of hope, where the narrator tries to imagine himself starting anew on his own terms with only a very limited role ascribed to women. In the course of the trip, the narrator has reveries about settling the wilderness with an array of imaginary female companions who are lifeless, devoid of agency, objectified, or altogether erased. In one reverie, the narrator imagines himself to be, quote, "a Jimmy Stewart type, working a ranch in a valley with a fine trout stream running through it, a grand herd of Hereford cattle, and a lovely woman named Ramona or something like that as a helpmate. The woman is listed here as one of the narrator's possessions, mentioned in one breath with a trout stream and a herd of pedigree cattle. Physical attributes matter, but her name, Ramona or something like that, does not, which means she could be anyone as long as she's good-looking and gentle, very much like a purebred cow. She is presented merely as a helpmate, support to the man, with no personality or agency of her own. The myth of the West, which the narrator indirectly invokes, serves him to erase female agency from the picture and foreground his own. In another reverie, the woman's role is filled by Sylvia, the real-life trip companion. In this daydream, she's imagined dead. Quote, "I had an instantaneous sweeping fantasy of Sylvia in a log cabin in Montana late in the 19th century. It is May, with only a few traces of snow left. She's in bed and has just died in childbirth. I failed as a midwife. I gather the 3 children around me. Her face will be beautiful but pale." Unquote. In this homesteaded fantasy of potential domestic happiness, the only agency is left to the man. The woman, ultimately passive, is showcased against beautiful yet static, like she is, mountain landscape, reminiscent of an Ansel Adams photo. She is pale, like the black and white palette so characteristic of the photographer's vision that fixes the majestic beauty of his objects in a timeless, contextless void. As in the previous fantasy, featuring a trout stream and a herd of cattle, the woman's physical attributes, not agency or active presence, matter. She is a decorative element in a story that belongs solely to the man, and he is the one to live on. The image of spring suggests that it is he who will be reborn, regenerated in self-reliance and independence. Tim and the narrator leave for the West not only to experience the healing properties of the myth of the West, but also with a mission. Their purpose is to protect the Western landscape, so deeply associated with masculinism, as Krista Comer has said, against the forces of encroaching industrialization. Quote, "They're going to dam up the Grand Canyon," the narrator drops a random comment by way of making conversation a few hours after he meets Tim in Key West. Tim takes the sensational news seriously and with concern. Quote, "No kidding. Jesus Christ, it will fill up with water. We probably ought to blow up the goddamn thing," he says, and starts planning the trip. Although the information about the dam in the Grand Canyon turns out to be fake, the men don't let go of the spontaneously conceived mission to defend the landscape, which is representative of all the features they feel they are being deprived of: freedom, independence, and self-reliance. Their determination to protect the canyon and free the Colorado River from the obstruction that would hamper its flow thus becomes synonymous with protecting their masculinity against women, perceived as carriers of civilization and social norms. It was Wallace Stegner who identified the conflict between what he called the roving man and the civilizing woman as one of the defining elements of the literary Western. Although A Good Day to Die is more a road novel than a literary Western, the conflict is there, and it plays out in a violent way, one that invalidates the woman. Although there's no new dam being built on the Colorado River, the men continue the trip northwest in search of any dam that blocks a river. And the force of their frustration turns not only against the structure they finally select to blast, but also against Sylvia. As the trio traverse the West, the trip becomes a brutal ascertainment of masculinity at the expense of the female hero, who is treated as if she were a dam on the free flow of male expression. For the male heroes, the trip becomes synonymous with the freedom to be destructive, to do whatever they want, to mistreat the female character, to indulge in alcohol and drugs, to engage in bar fights, reckless driving, and paid sex. 1 minute to fight each other, and the next to team up against Sylvia, to play malicious games that degrade and objectify her. For the heroine, the road becomes more like a roller coaster track, which is initially fun, but increasingly scary and impossible to descend from. For Sylvia, the road is far from being, in Christocoma's words, quote, suggestive of possibility, as it was for Kerouac and so many masculine figures in literature and cinema, unquote. Rather, Sylvia is a prisoner to the road, a hostage to the idea that she is like an obstacle that restrains the free expression of manhood, a notion that has her entrapped in something like an exercise wheel of continuous efforts to disprove it, sometimes against her own volition and judgment. For her, the road west is not open, but looks more like a maze and carries as little promise of freedom as the state highways in Los Angeles that Mariah Wyeth, the protagonist of Joel Didion's Play It As It Lays, published in 1970, so also about the same time, drives around in circles to ease her anxiety. Like Mariah, Sylvia is merely filling in a role in a screenplay written entirely by and for men. But in a final twist, the way west, in A Good Day to Die, becomes equally not suggestive of possibility for the male characters. The spontaneously adopted plan to go west and regenerate through violence, in the end, has no regenerative effect. The narrator is left to consider the very real consequences of destroying a farmer's property and of Tim's death, whether it's possible to escape the authorities, how to get Sylvia home, or how to tell Tim's parents. The novel's tragic outcome confirms Richard Slotkin's words at the beginning of Regeneration Through Violence, that myths influence us, quote, with such power that our perception of contemporary reality and our ability to function in the world are directly, often tragically, affected, unquote. It would seem that the novel's overarching message is that the hero's vision is so obliterated by their belief in the regenerative power of the myth that they are unable to deal with reality as it is. A quotation from Rainer Maria Rilke opening the book confirms this proposition, quote, each torpid turn of this world bears such disinherited children to whom neither what's been nor what is coming belongs, unquote. One might add that not only neither the past nor the future belongs to the heroes of A Good Day to Die, but not even the present does. The urban, industrialized actuality of postmodern American life proves frustrating enough to prompt an escapade westward in order to find a cure for a hurting masculinity, but the power of the myth of the West tragically affects the character's perception of reality and, consequently, has them commit felonious acts. Perhaps, after all, only the narrator's love of fishing offers some reality check, as it gives the protagonist an ability to read the environment as it is and stay alert to what it communicates. To sum up, the consequences of blasting a dam that Sylvia and the nameless narrator are left to deal with set the perspective more in focus, demonstrating that violence brings death, destruction, and more hurt rather than regeneration. Thank you.
In many ways, we're in a more violent society now. You know, we mentioned the rapes that are at the secondary school level. So two things have happened. While the hazing continues, it either goes underground so it doesn't get reported to the authorities, or it becomes even worse than I think in the old days. In the old days, at least someone was going to say, hold enough. Now, especially if alcohol or drugs are added to the equation, it goes to the point of death, where, for example, in fraternities, up to 13 deaths in a year, and at schools that have anti-education programs, it's sometimes hard for us to wrap our hearts and heads around this. Good point, thank you.
Sure, we have more questions from the audience. over there. Microphone. Wrench Gang by Edward Abbott.
The Monkey Wrench Gang by Edward Abbott, which I think came 2 years after Harris's novel, and I just wondered if Edward Abbey's satire on many things, but not on hypermasculinity, it seems to be taken very seriously. If there are connections there that you're cognizant of or noticed before.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. But I'm wondering, A Good Day to Die was published in 1972, and Edward Abbey's book was published, I think, 2 or 3, 1975. Mm-hmm. Right, so maybe Edward Abbey kind of took his ideas a little bit from Jim Harrison, or maybe the two authors.
That's what I'm thinking.
Right, maybe they knew each other.
It sounds to me, though, like when you read the Monkey Wrench Gang, the treatment of the woman in both books was exactly what you were talking about with
Really?
A Good Day to Die, exactly.
Mm-hmm. I didn't read the Monkey Wrench Gang, so right. So I wouldn't know if there was such a similarity in the treatment of the woman.
Yes.
Okay, but evidently.
Well, I think one of the things that distinguishes the Monkey Wrench Gang is that it's a satire on
Environmentalism?
things on Western laws and Western attitudes, but it takes very seriously its environmentalist
Right.
notion, but it also seems to not want to satirize the hypermasculinity that it maybe picks up from the Harrison text as well. So it's very stupidly earnest about the men can be just as appalling as they usually are in other contexts, and yet that's turned out humor rather than so it just makes you wonder what is Abbey satirizing if you get something from a very seriously dramatic novel such as Harrison's.
Mm-hmm.
I think in both, there's something that I call conditional morality. The hazers feel that what they're doing is justified. Martin Luther, when he was at Wittenberg, said, if we give you all of these tough treatments, you'll be able to survive whatever comes in the future. And that's true of the West. And then the second one would be the Monkey Wrench Gang is about destroying bulldozers and development. And I actually, as a journalist, have interviewed people who, after they went to jail, who destroyed developments. They believe that what they are doing is protecting the environment. And so it's, I call it conditional morality, just like, let's say, with John Krakauer's Everest, when people are dying all around you at the top of Everest, your responsibility is to yourself and maybe one other, unless you're a guide, and then the guide has more responsibility. So your paper is treating a lot of these, but I think the Monkey Wrench Gang is a good one. That could have been a paper up here. Yeah.
In A Good Day to Die, the environmental issue becomes a background issue very much. And the whole trip is just the relations between the trio, among the three protagonists, more than about the environment. So the blowing up of the dam is it's an issue. It's as if a pretext at the beginning of the novel to go west, but then it absolutely goes into the background, and the novel is just about the relations between the three and the manipulations, the triangulation that goes between the three heroes, and especially how the male heroes team up against Sylvia, and in the show of masculinity.
It seems like the blowing up of the dam suddenly gave direction to their directionless lives. All right?
Right. That's what I was. That's what I was trying to show. Yeah.
All right. More questions? We still have 10 minutes, so feel free to ask. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to formulate, or Hank?
In Spain, and I know it doesn't go to the extent that it's in the United States or the Netherlands or in Russia with the military, how many people had to go through some kind of rite of passage with your new group? Or does that not happen at all in Spain? No one had to? Did you?
It does happen almost in every case, especially even in universities, when it comes to residency and so on. Yeah, there are usually jokes made for students and so on. They have to, to go through this process of being accepted.
Okay, and then once you're in, then you do it to the next people the next year, right? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so feel free to ask questions to the audience as well if you feel like it. So it's an exchange here of ideas. Anyone? I have just a question then for Elzbieta. What you have been talking about is the dialectic between waterways and roads to some extent, right, in that novel of Harrison, right? So would you associate the waterways, the dam, the river with femininity and the road with masculinity in that novel? Will there be a correlation there between those two things, you think? And blowing up the dam and all the rest of it. Did you think about this?
No. No, I didn't take this angle. That you're saying that rivers and water would be associated with femininity, and roads and automobility. That's a great idea.
Actually, I haven't read the novel, so that's hence my question. But I think that would be interesting to explore, perhaps.
No, in the novel it's not that way. Rivers, for the nameless narrator, he doesn't have a name. That's why I have to label him in this way. For him, he loves rivers, but he loves fishing. And as fishing and hunting, traditionally, but male activities very much. So he, but it also gives hope because he's very, he knows different kinds of fish. He also knows how rivers work, all the eddies and whirlpools. What is a good hour of the day to go fishing, for instance? When is a bad day? So it does give him this good kind of reality check. He knows his rivers, but he mainly uses them for fishing, right? And he wants to protect the rivers, to have them, to make them available for fishing. So,
right, so he's exploiting the rivers in a way.
Yeah, in a way, yeah.
Right. Now I was just thinking the dichotomy between something which is a natural way and something which is imposed by man, right? A road is built and it's heading in a given direction because you want it to, because you're heading west. For instance, whereas waterways are natural and they work in a different way. That's just an idea. Right.
Great one.
Okay. Any other question or comment?
I was just thinking that in the American West right now, Arizona, Nevada, California, we've run out of water, and a lot of it is blamed on the Army Corps of Engineers that wanted these dams. And so there was something behind this impetus that was correct. Those waterways shouldn't be dammed up, and we were going to have a crisis. They just went about it in the most toxic way, as the word that we're using. Yeah.
Yeah, also an absurd way. I mean,
absurd, yeah. Grotesque, yeah.
Right. I mean, if you imagine the Colorado River and the Grand Canyon, and that there are two dams on the Colorado River, right? There's one in Glen Canyon, and there's the Hoover Dam.
Yeah, Glen Canyon is the one that was in the Monkey Wrench gang. Yes.
So blowing up Hoover Dam is just absurd. I mean, how do you go about it? It's a huge construction. So
Yes, when the Hoover Dam went up, monkey wrenchers, not Abbey, he might have been there, but not as a major player, came in and dropped a curtain down, all the way down, to look like a crack. That was their protest at the opening, at the ribbon cutting.
All right, so we still have time for one more question, if anyone is interested in formulating one in the audience. If not, I think we'll round it off here, and a big round of applause for the three speakers. Thank you